how many leads are we getting for each department, who are they going to, and how many are being converted every month. If we've got that, then we've got data, we've got analysis. If we don't have that, that's where we need to start. How do we get that data?
Welcome to the Catcher podcast. I'm Graham Moore, and today we're diving into a topic that's at the heart of every successful law firm, I think, building a pipeline of new clients. Whether your firm's looking to scale, diversify, or simply stay competitive, identifying new sources of business is absolutely critical. So to help us unpack this, we're joined by Ben Trott. Ben is the founder of Marketing Lawyers, a firm specializing in helping law practices generate leads and win new clients. Ben brings deep expertise in strategic marketing for law firms, and I can't wait to hear his insights. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Graham.
So, yeah, great to have you here. Before we dig into the business of building client pipelines, I'd love to ask, first of all, what's one non-work related thing that's been inspiring or exciting you recently?
I've got a new love, and the new love is country music. So I've been over to Nashville recently. I've only just got back a few weeks ago. So over to the Grand Ole Opry, which is their big country music stage. And when I'm not working, I'll be at country music festivals and gigs and things like that.
Okay, well, that's amazing. I'm actually planning a trip to Nashville myself next year. So yeah, may exchange a few notes with you after this recording.
Definitely.
So yeah, fascinating. So yeah, shifting onto your professional journey then, Ben, what drew you to focus on marketing specifically for law firms?
Well, many moons ago now, I wanted to be a lawyer for my sins, and I started off at a commercial law firm. Starting at the bottom up, doing administration, sitting on reception. And I was young and a bit wet behind the ears, and I found it magical working in a law firm, hearing about the sort of businesses, the deals that are going on, the clients we're representing. I then studied law, came out of law school, and at a party, as all good things start, somebody said, well, we've got a job going at a barrister's chambers. And again, that was in marketing. So I had this law degree, but I'd not quite started that journey into practicing or doing the LPC. And so I started in marketing for barristers and soon realized, because they're all self-employed, trying to get them to go in the same direction under one brand at chambers was quite hard.
Herding cats might be a good expression.
Yes, I think that would be easier. So I then moved to a more high street firm, and that's where I could get involved in things like SEO and pay-per-click and content and lead strategy. And over the course of about 6 years, I took on that responsibility. I learned everything, matching that with my law degree background and just an interest for the legal sector. I built an income pipeline for that firm, which took their website from doing around £250,000 a year to about £2.2 million a year. And that was through pay-per-click, SEO, good content, and then getting those leads converted. And then about 7 years ago, I decided to set up my own consultancy. And now we work with about 100 law firms around the world doing the same strategy that I know works.
Well, so you did the job in-house first of all, which is always a great way to start.
Yes, I've got green fingers. I've got all the calluses and the warts from doing the heavy lifting in-house from previously.
That's great. Yeah. So if we start fairly broad, why would you say mapping and identifying new sources of business is such a challenge for law firms compared to other industries?
I think historically, leads and sales are kind of in that same remit. And historically, law firms, obviously until the 90s, most of them weren't doing any marketing and couldn't do any marketing. So the people in sort of positions of power, they got a lot of their work through recommendation, personal recommendation, reputation. And that work would often come directly to them. You need to speak to Jane, you need to speak to John, and those leads would go to them. 1990s, early 2000s, firms start getting websites. Most in the early 2000s start getting websites. And the firms that are already established are having to get either new inquiries teams or their reception are answering more phone calls. And the business of law, everyone seems to be focused on, obviously, the referrals, the clients, the recommendations, the existing clients. And new business and dealing with telephone calls is not something that had been prioritized or even looked at previously. And what's not broken, you sort of don't fix. So I think with law firms, that kind of historical management of things come directly to you and it's not broken. I think that's why originally there's no CRM systems, there was no lead. You didn't need it. Work just came to you. But that's changed over the last 25 years, and not all forms of caught up. And I think a lot of firms are still owned by lawyers. We have ABSs now, but there's a focus on being a lawyer and doing the law well, and the business of law is something that you're not taught. You're not taught that at law school. So I think that's why there's a bit of a gap.
So do you think it's almost like a structural thing within the way law firms are organized, not so much a marketing thing only? It's that business of law knowledge experience?
Yeah, and I think people tended to see, if you wanted to expand your firm, you hired another lawyer. You didn't think about marketing and sales strategy and bringing in leads. And it's still the same at a lot of my clients. When they want to grow, they think about bringing in more lawyers, not bringing in more work to start off with.
You mentioned a word there that's often a dirty word in law firms, I think, sales. It's the term still seems to be business development rather than sales.
Yeah. I still use the word sales, even though everybody hates it. And for me, sales is service. You wouldn't go into a luxury car garage and they wouldn't act aloof whether they wanted your business or not. They would tell you about the car, they'd take you for a test drive, they'd follow up, they'd call you, they'd invite you back to events. But when it comes to law firms, we think that's salesy and can be a dirty word, but actually that's showing a level of service that they want your business. And we expect it from other businesses, but when it comes to law firms, we kind of think it's cheap and dirty. But I think it's service.
You think the perception of the public, of the buying public of legal services, is changing in that respect as well?
Yeah, I certainly do. We listen to a lot of leads for law firms and we help them with these strategies. And they expect you to get the law right. When they phone up with a problem, if you act aloof or you don't know when you can get a call back, you're going to get a call back, but I can't tell you when and who it will be. That's not great from a service point of view. And I think in other industries, clients get perhaps a better service or at least some more clarity. And because they can't do the law themselves that much, I think they're still okay about it, but there are certain firms doing a lot better in terms of client service than other firms.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any specific mistakes you see or outdated approaches from law firms when they're trying to generate new business?
So we have a piece of software that we put on people's websites to show what's happening when leads come into the firm. And it could be a referral because obviously people check your website out if you've been referred. And that software often tells us what happens when leads touch the firm and actually come in. So telephones across the board, every firm we work with is missing somewhere between 20 and 40% of their phone calls coming in. Wow. It's huge. And even the firms that say they're really good at it, when we map it, there's 20 to 40% missing, often commercial firms and high street firms as well. So that's one big area. The other is there's no follow-up strategy. And there's no real strategy of or education about what the firm can do, how they handle that process. And a good example of that is family law, for example. somebody phones up for a divorce and says, I wonder if you can help me, I'm going through a separation and I need some advice on the divorce process. Where do I start? Often the front of house will say, well, I can't help you because I'm not a lawyer. So it starts off with a very negative thing. They weren't expecting the first person to give them the divorce advice. And that's a kind of mistake I see a lot at firms. It starts off with, I can't, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not qualified, I'll get someone to call you back. And I think we can do better these days.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of solutions, I mean, how on that particular instance, in that scenario, how would you advise law firms to address that sort of situation?
It's just a change in mindset. They're not asking the individual on the front of house, could they advise? They're asking the brand, can Jones Law help? So it's, yes, certainly that's something we can advise on. I'm so sorry to hear you're going through that. Let me put you in touch with the family department. Do you mind holding for a second? So straight away, positive, bit of empathy, and we know exactly what to do. I'm putting you through to the right department. So it's just an educational change that you're the first brand touch point for the firm and you're showing the level of service. Simple change.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense and sounds so simple as well when you explain it.
When you play it back to managing partners and teams, what's happening on the phone calls, quickly they want to put in a training program around that service. Even though I'll call it sales, they'll call it service. Yeah.
So how would you say firms can better map their sort of business landscape to identify opportunities for growth? How do they work out what the best options are?
I think always for the moment is what data do we have about the status quo of the business? So how many leads are we getting for each department? Who are they going to? And how many are being converted every month? If we've got that, then we've got data, we've got analysis. If we don't have that, that's where we need to start. How do we get that data? And that could be through working with the front of house teams to map the inquiries. So software, recording incoming calls. A lot of the big firms record every single call coming into their business. So that whether it's a new inquiry or an existing client call, they've got their instructions recorded in case of any future need. Some firms are a little bit scared of that, but it's fairly common practice, and there's a lot of benefits to it. And I've never heard anyone say, I don't want to speak to a lawyer after hearing calls are recorded for training and monitoring purposes. They trust the law firms.
Yeah.
So I would start with mapping. So that's whether it's starting with a CRM or a spreadsheet or a lead management system. What data have we got? And are we doing the best we can with those leads? After you've got that data, we might be turning work away that we could be dealing with. I see that at firms because the business has evolved, but they haven't told the front of house the business has evolved. So there's a disconnect. Some firms say they're really busy, but when you speak to the management teams, they say there's 20-30% capacity in a team, but front of house is saying, oh, unfortunately, we're not taking on any more cases on anymore. So there's a disconnect. But also there might be inquiries that we're getting, such as private clients or commercial property, that we're not doing. But if there's enough leads potentially coming in, there may be a business opportunity there. But if we don't have the data, we can't make an informed decision.
Yeah, as with so many things, it usually starts with the data. And I think our experience is that law firms, this is an area where law firms are really challenged in terms of collecting and collating that data. Is that what you find?
Yeah, I think there's so many options these days for CRMs and HubSpots and Pipe Drives and Zoho and all these different pieces of software which are used for CRM. And they're nervous. Lawyers don't like change for lots of different systems and logins and having to pour more logins and software and systems onto already busy lawyers. So often there's some inaction. They sort of don't plug that leaky bucket. And it's because they're busy and they're heavily regulated. And, it's a time-based, in the main, it's a time-based selling hours for an hourly rate. And you're always going to try and maximize that. So there's not many hours for admin left and running the business. So yes, getting that data, understanding that data, often there's nobody who's in charge of that in a firm. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing any changes in that? As you say, it's absolutely crucial to developing the marketing strategies and you're deciding where you want to put your efforts. So are firms' approach to this changing?
I think so. And from the clients I'm working with, what I see more and more is after COVID, the workplace changed. People working from home more, and I think I'd like to see the stats, but I think there's a lot more fractional CMOs, COOs, lots of people who are doing consultancy as a result of changing their work-life balance after COVID. And so I'm seeing a lot more advisors coming into law firms to help them with these things, but as consultants, certainly more than I saw before COVID, which I think is only a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that outside expertise, a view of a business other than your own, I think is invaluable. So once firms have sort of started to understand their current business, how can they go about identifying new opportunities?
So I think it's working out where the best leads come from. And the best leads tend to come from personal recommendations, referrals from other professionals, things like that. Now that's BD, and it comes down to an individual level. You've got to build a relationship. Going to a breakfast meeting and having a bacon butty is not going to build a relationship overnight. You've got to be strategic and work out what's right for your firm. Business development isn't going to turn the tap on overnight, but things like Google, pay-per-click, SEO might. But it's about being niche. So if we've got data, we can make informed decisions. Online, there is a wide open market, mainly for very niche things. A good example is around property. So commercial property, for example, lots of firms don't think you can get that work online. And some work you can't. You have to have that relationship. If you're doing big plot sales for housing developers, you've got to have built a relationship up, and often they're not searching online. But I've seen general counsels from big businesses, search online for specific issues and contact law firms based on the specific thing they were searching for. And a good example is something like creating an LLP for property investment or transferring a commercial property into a SIP. Very specific questions. Somebody's likely to have finances because they have a property portfolio or a commercial property, or they own a business, so they're looking to transfer it into their pension. So money's not often the driver, it's who can do it. And they'll have probably met commercial property lawyers who can do these things, or corporate lawyers for the LLP. But they haven't asked them, they've Googled because they're still researching, is it something they want to do? And those sorts of things, no one's advertising on. They're low cost, very specific, they have a legal solution, and I think there's a big open market for those niche areas that firms can do, but they can advertise it online.
Yeah, that's a very niche approach, I think, to trying to differentiate yourself in what is a very crowded world for legal services.
It's very crowded. Niching down and finding those specific things you can help with is easier because you have that front door, you have less competitors. Everybody says they can do conveyancing, everybody says they can do family law, but are you the best at conveyancing for auction properties? Are you the best at family law for divorce when it involves a business? So finding those niches that work for you is really key.
So going deeper into digital marketing and how firms discover new sources, are there specific channels that you'd recommend, things that you find are working particularly well at the moment?
So certainly, I think your online website, your website is your shop front. And my main tip is always, if you don't have the product on the shelf, you won't be found online for it. So if you do commercial property and you deal with leases and renewals and dilapidations, you need a page on those. So those sub areas. Same with family. If you deal with finances and child arrangements and international relocation, think about those things and get them on the shelf. So get them on the website. Once you've got them on the website, you can do one of two things. So you can do SEO, which is to be found locally or nationally for your service. Often you'll need some external support to get up the rankings. So that's what agencies often help with. But they can also help with content creation and coming up with the ideas for these sub-services. The quickest way to get to the top is how Google gets all of its money, 90% of its money, which is Google Ads. So it will allow you to have the top spot when someone types in, corporate lawyer London or, divorce involving a business. So that's a quicker way to do it, and you can test out what works faster. But you will need things like phone call tracking, so you can see what you've spent versus what phone calls have come in. And that's where the data is really key. And what we do is we often map from the spend to the phone call to the results, so the case being opened on the case management system of what that spend was, and even working with the lawyer or lawyers or front of house to say, right, that's something we brought in as a lead. Has it been quoted? Has it been chased up? And then on the case management system, can we run the finances so we can work out a return on investment? So SEO and Google Ads are two big areas to focus on.
Yeah, some great advice there. And as you say, being able to track the expenditure and actually know what you're getting in return for that spend, I think is absolutely key if you're going to make the most of that channel. Otherwise, you've not got the confidence of making the spend. Yeah. How about other channels? Email marketing has always been a big thing for law firms. LinkedIn. Any thoughts on those?
So LinkedIn, it's your personal BD. It's the social media. LinkedIn for me works very well. We put out videos. We put out testimonials. We do the day-to-day things that we're doing. If I'm traveling in America, I will do some posts, when I see the Supreme Court of Louisiana or something like that, something that's interesting. And but that takes time. You've got to build up a following. You've got to be real. You don't want to be posting holiday snaps. You've got to kind of tie it back in. No one wants to see someone having a pint next to the beach. What they want to see is, some thoughts, some sharing of information that could be useful to them. And they're the ones that get the most engagement, the sharing something of knowledge that they've learned. So LinkedIn is good, certainly gets us a good return on investment, and we enjoy sharing knowledge. Other social medias, kind of Instagrams, your TikToks. I have a few clients who have good followings on there. Again, it's a place for recommendation referral, but direct work from them is often quite low. But it's more about building that brand, building that persona. You've got to work at it constantly, but you only need a target market. If your target market is certain business owners in a certain area, it's easier to get that. If it's a distress purchase like personal injury or motoring law, you only need one when you need one. And most people will use something like Google. It's like an emergency locksmith doing lots of TikTok videos. You only need one when you lose your keys in front of your house. Yeah. And TikTok's not your first method of finding somebody. So I'm keen for people to build their following, but return on investment for me is always key. And SEO, Google Ads, and building your own network have always been the best.
Yeah. Okay. Thinking more about existing resources, often the best opportunities are closer to home. How can firms better leverage their existing relationships, their clients, former clients, referral networks to also grow their pipeline?
I think you said it best a short while ago about the email marketing. The relationship you have with your clients. Is it one way? A client's coming to you because they need help, but are you going out to them to share knowledge, to share insight, to offer things that are going to have a benefit to them? Is it going to save them time? Is it going to save them money in the long run? Is it going to lower their risk now or in the future? Or is it advice that they need to make an informed decision because they're going down the wrong path, or they're thinking about selling their business, or they're having a divorce, but they really need their wills changed as well? So not just doing the transaction of the legal thing you've been instructed on, but how else can we help this individual? And certainly email marketing is a way to, as a trusted advisor, get back in front of your clients, get front of mind, and help them. And a good example was the budget. I must have received hundreds of emails about the budget from law firms about how it's affecting businesses, but only one decided to send me a physical brochure, something that was probably produced through AI, and it came to my corporate address, and that's the only one that I've kept. So it's old school in that it's a physical brochure. All the other emails have been deleted because I hadn't had time to read them then and there. But there's one which I've kept and which is on my desk, which is the physical brochure. So people thinking emails is the best. There's only one way which is cut through, which is actually a physical brochure.
Yeah,
so certainly
interesting that.
Email
Yeah.
and brochure is, I think people are moving back to sort of those physical things again.
It's as you say, it's that phrase cut through, isn't it? Everybody receives so many emails, and actually you receive very little in the post these days. It's actually a bit of a novelty, and you can potentially turn that to your advantage. Something we've done a few times in our business, and we did a really interesting campaign for an event quite recently where we sent out some scratch cards, and got an amazing response because people just really appreciated receiving something in the post.
Yeah, and you hear the stories of people using InkPact and other providers where handwritten letters are actually sent out. No one tends to receive a handwritten letter. I certainly haven't for years.
Yeah.
But sending that to your clients, a thank you note for working with them, or if you're looking to do an event, sending them a handwritten letter to say, we'd really like you to come to this event. These are the benefits you're going to get, and it'd be lovely to catch up. Email versus a handwritten letter. The handwritten letter is going to get a better response rate.
Yeah, it's great. Great thought that. So, bring the conversation back to data. Law firms have loads of data, and very often they're really not using it effectively from a marketing perspective. Data about their existing clients. How can firms tap into that? The gold mine they've got, and make better use of it.
I think it's working out what data they've got and what data they've got access to. Case management systems have a gold mine of data, and so do the email database. So your server, you can interrogate that to work out who is working with who across the business, who's not speaking to who across the business, and also externally. If you're sat there and you've got, however many people in your law firm, and you're looking to get into perhaps a new business, who's based locally or further away, first place to start is interrogating your email server. Has anybody emailed anyone at that email extension over the last few years? And then suddenly you find out that Jane or John or has a family member there, and they've been emailing, and there might be an in. So using the data you've already got to look at where you want to go with your business. And who's already got relationships, who went to university with who studied with who, used to work with who's already emailing at different firms, and can we build referral networks from those firms? So finding out what data we've got to start off with. So that's on that BD side of things. But case management systems, there's so much data there, from average file open to file close times for different types of areas of law. That's a great marketing stat. We can then say, we review commercial lease renewals in X amount of time. That's a stat that I've never seen on a law firm website about how quick, because most people want things done quickly. So the data is there. It's just, have you thought about how to use it? And have you worked with your case management provider or your data supplier or your email company to interrogate that data and work out what to do with it? So working perhaps with a marketing agency of, how can we better promote the brand? How can we use that data? How can we reach out? There's a couple of pieces of software now, especially with AI. One of them is response.ai. And it's a place where you can film a single video and it will be tailored to every single email address. So it works on the extension and it will film their website and it will look like you've reached out personally, but actually it will be tailored via AI. So there's a lot you can do.
That's amazing. That is, on the data thing. Subject obviously quite close to my heart, and we're always amazed by the lack of use of the data that law firms are just sat on. As you say, there is so much information buried in there. It just needs somebody to take the time or take the interest to make use of it.
One of the big ones we always advise firms on is source codes. Matter start and client source codes. And quite often I'll go into a firm and say, let's have a look at the files opened over the last 12 months. And can you send me all the different matter source codes that you've got? So I will then get a spreadsheet of 150 different ones from estate agents to other individual lawyers to staff referrals, and sometimes things like a flyer in a magazine, which is its own source code, which has never been used. And sometimes some firms will confuse the source with the method of inquiry. So live chat is a method, telephone call is a method, walk-in is a method, but it's not how they heard about us. It's not where they found us. Now, high street brand awareness might be, and then they physically walked in, but they're two different things. You can know us from the high street and phone in. So getting the right source codes, which actually can get you really good data, and boiling them down to just a few. So professional recommendation, existing/previous client, web, recommendation from maybe a specific source like an estate agency, and any high street presence. There's not many source codes. You can have sub-source codes, but it's what we're doing with that data. If we're getting a lot of work from a law firm we didn't know, why aren't we reaching out to them? Why aren't we sending stuff back? And so the data's there. It's just, what are we doing with it?
Yeah, absolutely. On that source code thing, it's amazing the values that you see in those source codes, and often also the results that the reports give you. First of all, with the quality of data that's being collected, with 90% of new matters supposedly coming from walking off the street or something, just because it's at the top of the list.
That's it. Number one at the list always gets the most.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let's make this actionable for our listeners. If a law firm wants to jumpstart their business development, what's one thing they could do in the next 30 days?
Start measuring. So anything that measured tends to get better, or at least you can find solutions. So start measuring, and there's a couple of ways to do that. One is you can use software. So a good place to start is your website. Even if you don't think you're getting traffic, it's good to check that. That will record phone calls coming through the website, web forms, and then we can you can sit with your front of house team or whoever deals with your leads and see what's happening. You can listen in, see if calls are being picked up, and if they are, then we can work with the new inquiries team to see who they've been sent to across the business. Simple spreadsheet if you don't have CRM systems. Then we've got some data, and then we know, are things going to the right place? Are we turning work away? Are we not picking up the phone? And across every firm that we work with, that's where we start. And you'll find there's always things to improve upon.
Yeah, that's great. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, or whatever the phrase is. So start with measuring. Great advice there. Looking sort of slightly longer firm, if there's a strategy that takes longer to implement, but has has a longer payoff, a higher payoff in the long run, what would you suggest?
Two things really. So I have an SEO and pay-per-click hat on because I'm a digital marketing guy, but also, and it's the same for my business, some of the best work comes from building personal relationships. The firms that I work with, a lot of them have come through building relationships and referrals and recommendations over my career. So, having two areas, the professional recommendations, so building your network, helping people. It's not something you can do overnight, but it has the best return long term. That's what I'd focus on. There's no quick wins, as people like to say, with that, but over the long term, it will pay off. And it's about not thinking you're going to get an instruction today, tomorrow, this year. It's about the long term. And so being really interested in people and helping them out and seeing them regularly. And on the other side, the SEO. So, for example, we will help international law firms set up in the UK. And a lot of that work is through recommendation from brokers and other intermediaries where people struggle, especially international law firms will struggle understanding the UK regulation system, the SRA, how it all works. But that's what we're good at. So we've set up a lot of law firms over the years, especially international firms opening branch offices. And things like SEO really work. Writing articles that are specific on very niche things and getting that to the top of Google. Not everyone's going to buy it, but that's working for us 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And being that specific has led to some very interesting and big instructions.
Yeah, that's I think one of the things that I've noticed with SEO is that people are often a bit too impatient with it. If it doesn't show results in a few weeks, then it's a waste of money. But as you say, it's a long-term investment, but the payoff is there.
It's a long-term investment, and you've got to think of evergreen. So people are not Googling 6 top tips to sell your business, but what they are Googling is, how do I get the most value when I sell my business? How do I value my business? How do I negotiate heads of terms? Very specific things, which are evergreen. They're not going to change. Do I need a lawyer to sell my business? It's a very commonly searched phrase because they don't know. And then you can persuade them on an article why you do need, or what the pros and cons and risks are. So thinking not about the kind of emailed 6 top tips, top 3 things, top 6 things to avoid, but thinking the evergreen, that's what's going to last, and that's the long-term gain.
Yeah, great advice. So you've worked with many law firms over the years. What's one surprising lesson or insight you've gained about how law firms approach their marketing?
I think it's still what we spoke about at the start, coming full circle, which is the dirty word of sales. For me, as I said, it's service, and I still think it's because a lot of work came to people through recommendation, and marketing was prohibited. And we still work with jurisdictions where it is prohibited. It's still that you can't advertise. Places like India or Nigeria, more restrictive systems. And so that's why I think, sales historically, that chasing after work felt cheap. You're a regulated profession. But actually that's not the case. If you phoned a luxury hotel and said, do you mind if I'm asking, do you have any hotel rooms, next Thursday? And they said, oh, I don't know, I'll have to speak to housekeeping. You'd find it strange. And I'll give you a call back after I've spoken to them. Can I take your details? I don't know if we've got any rooms available. And I'm not sure when you're going to get a call back. You wouldn't stay there. But, giving somebody the service, is sales, is service for me. And I think because it's across the board, I always thought some firms would be much better than others. But I still find, and it could be down to training, I still find that I think law schools should train people on sales tactics and how you build relationships with people, because that's the skill I think is missing in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Sales is service. I think that's a great takeaway. So before we wrap up, if you were advising a managing partner at say a mid-sized law firm who's struggling to bring in new clients, what one advice would you give them? One piece of advice would you give them?
It sounds simple, but start with the basics. So start listening to how clients are being spoken to across the firm. And again, sitting with your front of house new inquiries teams to work out how that first touch point, whether it's a referral, a recommendation, or a find online, how is that being managed through the business? And instead of going after straight away bringing in new work through marketing, through SEO, through pay-per-click, starting with the basics. What do we do when someone phones the firm? And is that what we'd expect? And are we doing the best we can?
Yeah, that's great advice. So Ben, it's been a pleasure talking to you, having you on the show. Where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about marketing lawyers?
So you can either go to marketinglawyers.co.uk, or you can search Ben Trott online and find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat to anybody about marketing or sales or service.
That's great. Thanks again, Ben. And to our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, please subscribe to the Catcher podcast and share it with your network. See you next time.